it was illegal for his Iranian father to marry his very white, English, blonde, hazel-eyed, fair-skinned mother from southern Idaho. And all of that came out of the people and the heroes of the civil rights movement, which made it possible for people to be with people that didn't look like them, or for people who didn't share the same religion. And so that's the beauty of what has happened, and we're just carrying that forward. You're just doing what your dad.
Hi, my name is Charlotte George. Thank you so much for being with us today. This is Season 5, Episode 5 of our Make Today Well-Lived podcast. Here with us today is Donzelay Abernathy and Dar Dixon. Donzelay is the goddaughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., an actor, author, and civil rights activist. Her husband, Dar Dixon, is also here with us today. He is a renowned actor, director, and producer, as well as refugee from Iran. We are so privileged and honored to have you here with us today. What is the most important lesson you learned from your father, Reverend Ralph Abernathy, and your godfather, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.?
Thank you so much for inviting us to be here today. I think the most important thing I learned from my dad and from Uncle Martin is that we are all God's children. Black, white, Native American, Asian, Indian, all of us together, and that we all bleed the same, and that the most important thing we have to do is to create a world that welcomes everyone to be a part of us.
That was so beautiful, and I think so relevant to the world we live in today, just reminding that we're all the same and that it is our responsibility to create a beautiful and welcoming world for everyone, regardless of gender, race, identity. My next question is, how did your dad and MLK explain to you and the other kids in your community what was going on with the civil rights movement, and kind of how did that affect your childhood?
When my mother was pregnant with me, our home was bombed. And so I was born trembling for the first 6 months of my life. And immediately, they needed me to understand. My sister needed to understand. Uncle Martin's children, Yolanda, and then Martin would come in October after I was born. They wanted us to understand what they were doing, the importance, and they didn't want to shield us because the threat of death was imminent. So when we lived in Montgomery, they called every morning and every evening and threatened to kill us. They had already bombed my dad's, our home, my father's church, Bell Street Church, Mount Olive Church, and then the home of Reverend Robert Gratz, a white pastor of an all-black congregation, because they thought he was a bad white man for associating with black people. And so they wanted us to understand. I'll never forget in 1963, when Medgar Evers was killed in his driveway. He was shot, and his children were there in the house. They saw it and then ran and hid in the bathtub. They wanted us to understand that the day was going to come when they weren't going to come back into the house, and that we had to be prepared. But that they were doing something that would benefit us as a nation, black people as a people, and that each one of us had our responsibility to carry the torch that they were going to pass to us. They wanted us to understand that our ancestors had endured 244 plus years of slavery in America. And then we had endured 100 years of Jim Crow segregation. So that was more than 300 44 years, or really more, because we started arriving in the 1500s. And there were more people of color, black people in America, than there were white people. So when the Second Continental Congress got ready to appropriate seats in Congress, they listed us as 3/5 of a human being. But it didn't matter what somebody else said about us. What mattered was what we each individually thought of who we were and who we are as human beings. And that we were beautiful, that we were smart, we were good, intelligent, hard workers. And that's what we needed to strive to continue to be as we were grow into adulthood. And they gave us lessons that would last a lifetime. And so they wanted us to do our parts. And when we were little, my sister, Wandlin, and Uncle Martin's oldest daughter, Yolanda, used to say we were cursed because people called and tried to kill us, and people hated us and threatened Daddy and Uncle Martin on a regular basis. And then so many people that we knew were killed. And so, but I kept trying to tell my sister and Yolanda, no, we're blessed. We're blessed because we're witnessing and living through the transition of America, where our country would now become the land of the free and the home of the brave for every American, and that the principles that were written by Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence would actually be realized in our lifetime. And so we witnessed that, and so I kept trying to let them know. But I was younger. I was a little kid. But I had listened to Uncle Martin, and I'd listened to my dad. And so it was humbling. That's all I can say. It was really humbling, and made me very shy as a little girl. I didn't talk a lot, but I read books. And then I thought, well, I'm going to be the best that I can be. And if I can be the best that I can be 1/8 of as good as they were. And that's all that mattered.
Dar, this question's for you. How have your experiences as an immigrant influenced your identity and your approach to life?
I was born as an American and an Iranian citizen in Tehran, Iran. Didn't have a name for the first 2 days of my life. Had 2 nationalities, though. So I did come here when I was 2 years old, and I was, raised mostly in the United States, and then I went back. We, as a family, went back to Iran when I was 12 years old, and we stayed for 3 more years until the revolution started to rumble, and there's always that little rumble before the poop hits the fan, and we. We escaped with the clothes on our back. That was it. And I was 15 at the time. And so there was a new law that happened. I'll back up one step. In Iran, my father worked for the Iranian government, for the Ministry of War, which is the Department of Defense in this country. And he had 3 degrees of separation from the Shah, which is quite a big deal. That doesn't happen easily. And, that it happened with a guy with an American white wife and 4 white boy, this face is half Persian, right? Was a big deal. And so when we got the message, when Dad got the message from his boss, the admiral, who got it from his boss, the 5-star general, who directly reported to the Shah, if you had a child that was going to turn 15 years of age, which was me, you had to deposit 1 million rials, 10,000 US in those days, into the national bank. And if you returned back to Iran, then that money would be returned to you. And that is the drums of war, okay? Because they need 15-year-olds to stay so that you can get into the army and go and fight for your country. which is particularly nasty business in any country. There's a reason they go with young men and not older men. But so I was raised in America. And so my full name is Dariush Dixon Bijarchi. And so I'm at this, boarding school, and, God bless the Webb School, no disparagement, but I didn't want to be there. And the news hit us when we left Iran. We landed in Manhattan, and we're at the hotel, and Mom comes out after being on the phone with Dad, and she's just white as a sheet. What happened? She goes, "We can't go back." And we're all like, well, cool, because we like America. But, underneath that is like, what's going on? Where's Dad? Well, he's going to come. He's going to come. You know that conversation when you're young, right? What's going to happen? It's not dissimilar to Dawn Zlay's conversation with her parents, with her father, and with Uncle Martin. I'm going to not be back here on Monday. He was in Iran for a year before he actually got out, maybe a little more. I don't really remember, because I just kind of, you turn off your emotional state. And I just thought every day, they're going to kill Dad. And I expect to start getting upset.
Tell them how you all saw your father's friends being
I'm going to get there, yeah. So this, of course, he got out, and we left in 77, and by the time Dad got back, it was 78-ish, and we're in New Mexico again, and he got a job to go into a little town called Lima, Ohio, which I'd never heard of in my life, and it's like right in the middle of the country, sort of ish. It's the Midwest, and all of a sudden here come the Bijarchis. And that it's like every time we go, we're like alien family landing in this place, and they're like, "Who are you?" And you got to go through the same routine over and over. Now, I've moved personally over 80 times in my life. In my family, before I left on my own, I think it would be, I'm going to be conservative and say we moved at least a dozen times. I'm sure it was a little bit more, but at least a dozen times. And so, this routine of always being the new guys and the new people with the new strange names and stuff. So we land in Ohio, and we're going through all this the new kid routine again. And 79 rolls around. We all know what happened then, the hostage situation, which is why you have so many Iranians here in this school, and so many in Los Angeles. The weather is very similar to the Tehran climate. How these folks landed in Beverly Hills and not Peoria, Illinois, or Lima, Ohio, or Los Alamos, New Mexico, you'd have to ask them. It's another question, because this is one of the toniest, upscale, expensive neighborhoods in the country. But there was a guy named Walter Cronkite, and he used to do the CBS Evening News, and it was a big deal because that was the news. And I know everybody thinks they understand what news is, but you don't. And I really recommend you start using your brain. Critical thinking is imperative. And as they start showing the news, they start talking about the hostage situation. And they start showing these kangaroo courts come up. And damn it. One by one, I would see these men who were... they worked in the military, and they would invite Dad and the family, and we would go and sit and break bread, and, they were hanging. They were hanging for crimes against the people. In a kangaroo court, some jacked up charges, no real trial. 10 minutes later, you're hanging from a crane in front of everybody, and the crowd's bloodlust is cheering. And it just kept happening. It kept happening. And my father's not a guy who really, he's a funny guy, and he's very entertaining and engaging, but he doesn't know how to use his words, and he really, he's not from a generation where they talk about those things. And I just watched him kind of implode, you know what I mean? And it scared the life out of him, and it was upsetting. And he couldn't explain what was happening to me, but that's the stuff that happens.
Dar had this vulnerability and this amazing talent and this great heart. And it didn't matter what he looked like, and it didn't matter his color or where he was from. And there were a bunch of white Christian friends that I had who said, "Oh no, you can't go with him. He's an Iranian.
Oh my God.
They're
All the
abusive.
time.
Haven't you seen that movie, Not Without My Daughter?" And all of this horrible, hateful thing that these white girls were saying to me. And at that moment, that's when I knew they couldn't be my friend, because they didn't know Dar. And Dar was good, and Dar was kind, and Dar was loving. And his dad was amazing and wicked smart. And so it was like, this is where I need to be, and this is where I'm gonna be. And and then the years grew, and then one day, we were down there, and we'd come back from Long Beach, and he said, "Stand on top of the sofa." And I stood on top of the sofa, and that's when you asked me to marry you. And it was beautiful. And trust me, it hasn't been easy.
Stand on top of the sofa.
You made me, because I'm so little, you made me stand on top of the sofa. But it was great. And I don't regret any of it, not for a second. And I wouldn't trade him for anyone.
First, just your guys' love story and the love that you have for each other is so clear, and like you can just see it talking to you guys, and it's beautiful and very inspiring. And randomly, I'm a big reader, and I was reading a book that has nothing to do with history, or it's like a fantasy book, and it said, all it takes is, I'm going to butcher the quote, but it was like, all it takes is one generation to rewrite history, and then they teach that generation forward, and then all of a sudden lies become history and lies become fact. And that's just, what I keep thinking about when you're saying it, because it is true, and that there is such an oral history, and even more so a written history. And when you take opinions, and when you take things when you don't do your own research and you don't form your own opinions, then that carries on, and we have a responsibility to the past and to history to carry on those lessons, because there's a lot of people who won't.
I didn't grow up with kids as awake as you guys are, and socially we laugh, right? But it's a big deal. You don't owe history anything. You know who you owe? You owe yourself. If you owe yourself, if you take care of yourself, trust me when I tell you this, we lead by example. And that's how you honor history. That's how you honor those shoulders that you stand on. And that's how you best serve everyone. That's how, but you owe it to yourself.
You're not just saying these things, you're physically doing them, and this message that you're spreading of, learning, and that isn't even, in my mind, that isn't even the clear message that you're spreading. It's, of love and peace and activism, but you are showing by example what this generation needs to be doing and what past generations are doing, and you're not just saying it, but you're living these lives of purpose, and it's just amazing to hear about.
It's the Loving decision. It was a court case.
Loving was the couple's last name, and they were interracial.
And he was an interracial couple, and they made it possible for interracial marriage to happen. And I remember hearing your mother and father speak about the fact that it was illegal for his Iranian father to marry his very white, English, blonde, hazel-eyed, fair-skinned mother from southern Idaho. And all of that came out of the people and the heroes of the civil rights movement, which made it possible for people to be with people that didn't look like them, or for people who didn't share the same religion. And so that's the beauty of what has happened. And we're just carrying that forward. You're just doing what your dad did.
Look, here's the thing. People always do this, and it comes up all the time, and you just touched on it. To be socially active and to be to try to do the right thing, you don't have to go out and do what what Reverend and Uncle Martin did, you know. That may not be your thing, you know. You could just go down, you know, like, here's some things I did when I needed to get myself up off my butt and stop feeling sorry for myself about, you know, this cult and all this trouble I was in. God, I was in a lot of trouble. You'll have to buy the book if you want to find that out. Anyway, I went to the Downtown Women's Center. That didn't work out so well because I found out I made a lot of the ladies uncomfortable because I looked like the man. They're ladies of color, and I was like, okay, I get it. So I just, all right, that's not going to work. So then I went down and I can't say work with, but I just go and sit and listen. Southern California Ceasefire Committee, and they meet in South Los Angeles. In South Los Angeles, unfortunately, there's murder all the time. It never gets reported, ever, which is a whole other conversation. You know, that's what I do. Then I go and I work with the phenomenal angels of the community, the underserved Latino and Black girls in Hawthorne area. You know, then I went second call and work with ex-felons trying to reintegrate into society so they can get a job. You know, that's what I did, though. You don't have to do that. You can just get a bag. You can go buy a bunch of soap, toothpaste, and socks. Socks are what people who are unhoused, that's what they need the most. One pair of socks.
Other things we used to do here, because we lived here in Beverly Hills, is we got to speak and got to know all of the homeless people that are here in the Beverly Hills area.
They all knew me
and
by first
they
name.
know us by first name, and they would ask us, and you know, we'd ask what you need. Dar would ask what he needed, because Dar started the conversations always. And we'd go buy them coffee, go buy them muffins, go buy them a pizza, go buy whatever they wanted, because no matter what, we had more than they did. And there was this lovely lady, Bronwyn. I mean, I would see her, and she was having psychological issues.
She's schizophrenic.
Yeah, but whatever she needed and whatever she wanted that day, I would bring it to her, and sometimes bring it without her asking.
We're not kidding now, actually.
Oh,
every
yeah.
single
Oh,
homeless
yeah.
person.
We knew every homeless person
And
here.
the cops thought we were criminal. What are you doing talking to them? I'm like, well, why
Why
not?
not?
Is there a law against it?
Why
And
not?
just
They're
kinda
human
looked
beings.
at us like, what? Oh my, you walk your talk. I'm like, okay.
But it's
I don't know what that
why
means.
not? And they're here in Beverly Hills. And who are we to think that we're better than, simply because we have a home? In a minute, in an instance, we could lose our homes. Like all of my friends who've lost their homes in the Palisades right now, or my friends or family members who've lost their home in Pasadena and Altadena. So
Yeah.
it could all be gone in a second. So, but yeah, and
Listen,
it's
you
about
never
serving.
feel better about the world and about life in general than you do when you go and you help people
That's right.
that are less fortunate than you simply because of the color of their skin
Or the religion.
or their religion or their birth
their economic status.
status. You know, some people are born without legs, some people are born without eyes, some people are born without arms, you know. You'll never feel better about yourself. And here's the sneaky little thing that no one tells you. I'm going to tell you right now. Are you listening? You get helped more by them than you do in helping them.
And in the Bible, and they used to say, Jesus said, "What you do unto the least of these, my brethren, you do also unto me." And then the other thing I learned in the civil rights movement was, how can you hate your brother who you cannot see and love a God who you can't?
I think what else you said too, of why not? Like, that should be the title of this, because why would you not help somebody? And it just reminds me of, you know, there was this homeless man right here in Beverly Hills. I wonder if you probably knew him too.
I'm sure. What did he look like? White man? Black
it-
man?
He was
Asian?
black. I haven't seen
Tony?
him in a few
Skinny?
years.
Fred or
I think his
Tony?
name was Fred.
Yeah, he has a guitar.
Fred
Yes.
the guitar,
Yeah, it's Fred. Yeah,
Fred.
he's always on Rodeo Drive.
Yeah.
Fred. Yeah.
Fred. We used to.
Right, too.
Yeah.
I used to always have lemonade stands when I was little, and we would always, my parents taught me and raised me that, yeah, when we had, you know, we always made cookies and we always brought lemonade.
Yeah.
And why would you not do that? Because if you have, you know, we all have something that we can help, and we're all people, and
exactly
everything
right.
can go in an instant, and especially what we're witnessing in our own backyard and in our own city. You never think it's going to be you. And all my friends, family, everything is gone, and you would want people to help you in that situation. So why not help somebody else?
Hi, I'm Dia Tilly. I'll be taking over the interview from Charlotte now. So I just wanted to say thank you for sharing everything. I think every idea you guys touched upon was beautifully said. And my favorite thing that stuck out to me, and I think should stick out to students watching, is that we are all not that different.
No.
If you sit down with someone and take the time to listen to who they are, where they're from, you're going to realize we are all human. We might look different, but we are all the same. Our
right.
parents all came from somewhere else.
That's right.
We like the same things. I think it's just so many people don't want to take that time. It takes 2 minutes. When we talked before, we've like met each other, but we know so much about each other in those 2 minutes. So I think that's something maybe more people need to do.
Right.
And you, both your stories are so different, but they intersect so much. You guys have so much in common to talk about. You both are so strong to talk about it with others, because now we're going to learn from you guys, and now we have a story to tell. We can tell you our stories. And I think you guys are a great example of two different people that are really not all that different. And so I have another question for you, Donzale. How did your family impact your own education, such as were there integrated schools, higher education, or social standing?
When the Civil Rights Movement started, my dad was the Dean of Men at Alabama State University. He also taught at the college. So Joanne Robinson, an English professor at the university, was the one who said to my dad, we need to have a boycott, which would have been my dad's third boycott. So the leaders of that movement were professors and teachers at a university, and the people that were the students at the university that really got involved. But the people of Montgomery, this city, they were, they took to the streets. And then the other thing is, all of the people they were women. So there was Claudette Coben, a young girl, Mary Louise, and Rosa Parks, 3 women. And Rosa was the oldest. The other girls were teenagers, and one was an unwed mother. But these black women were the facilitators of change. And so my mother was a business education high school teacher. She wrote the business plan for the Montgomery bus boycott. She never got any credit because she was the wife. But education was the most important thing. So I did not have the luxury of not being a good student. I just had to be a good student, period. And my sister stuttered because she was left-handed. And back then, they would hit you on your left hand and force you to write with your right hand. And so my poor sister, oh my goodness, because she stuttered and the teachers were so mean and made her so afraid. When my sister learned, and she's 3 years older, when she learned to count, I learned to count. When she learned to write, I learned to write. When she learned to read, I learned to read. And then I became the person who had to speak for her because she couldn't get the words. She was so frustrated. She couldn't get her mouth together to get the words out. And so I spoke for my sister, and we made up our own little language, but I spoke for her to my parents or to any adult. Just like how people ridiculed President Biden for stuttering. My sister was worse. But yeah, and so it was hard. But education was the most important thing. And unlike my brothers and my sister, I messed up. I have only a bachelor's degree. I've written 2 history books, however, and I've taught teachers through the Teach American History program how to teach history, civil rights history, and black history. But because I don't have a master's or a doctorate, I can't work in the university system.
Oh.
So I go and I speak. But it's not the same thing, because I would really prefer to have a classroom, to be in a university, and to literally teach students. My sister got her master's degree. She went to Oberlin, and then she went to Boston Conservatory of Music. My brother Kwame went to Williams College, and then he went to University of Pennsylvania Law School. He was the first person in his graduating class to be offered a job. and that was the district attorney's office in Philadelphia. And my brother Ralph III, he got his undergraduate, and then he got an honorary doctorate degree. My mother got an honorary doctorate. My father got 3 or 4 honorary doctorate degrees, and I'm just Donzale. And so, yes, I feel like I've failed, but I continuously write, and I continuously try to put out the best that I can and read history. Even though I work in Hollywood, I need that intellectual stimulation. But
You sound
education,
like an Iranian right now.
Well, that's
with the
just
education. It's
but,
funny. It's
but that's
funny.
that's the way I am, and I've come from a family of teachers, and so education is the dividing line. Education is the most important thing. And when we integrated the elementary schools, because I learned to do all of these things what my sister did, when I got to the 3rd grade, I was the star pupil in the class. So my papers were all at the front of the tree. My teacher had a little learning tree, and when the students arrived and the parents arrived at the PTA meeting, my papers were all at the top of the tree. And so the white parents wanted to know, who is this Donzale? And the teacher said, Donzale. They let them know that I was the little black kid in the class. And so I came back to school the next day. My teacher said, Donzale, because of the parents, your papers can no longer be at the top of the tree. You have to be in the back and you have to be in the bottom, but you're still my little star pupil. And I'm depending upon you. And it didn't matter what other people said. I still was going to do well. And then when I got to the 4th grade, the teacher put me in the back of the classroom. She'd ask a question, and of course my hand would go up right away, and she would ignore me like I wasn't even there, like I didn't say anything. So for an entire year, she didn't help me. But what my parents did was they took me to this place called the Learning Foundation. It was all of us. My mother took the 3 of us. And Brother Clint, this white man who wore that brown monk uniform.
Brother Clint wore a brown monk outfit?
Yeah, and
That's
so
amazing.
he would sit me on his lap, and he would say to me, so what happened in school today? And I would tell him, and then I'd start crying because I'd say, Miss Baker did this, and she did this, and she ignored me. And subsequently, he would hold me. He would tell me he loved me. And then he said, okay, let's sit down and let's learn to read. And he would undo every ounce of hatred that teacher had shown me. He showed me love, and it made all the difference. And I just kept going, and I just kept going, and I just kept going, and I still can't learn enough. And yeah, that's just who we are as human beings. You have to make that decision. My dad used to say, either you're going to be your own best friend, or you're going to be your own worst enemy. Decide to be your best friend, and when you decide to be your best friend, you'll do those things that you know that are best for you.
Your positive way of thinking from a young age is very inspiring. Like, even though your teacher had to put your paper in the back, you still knew you were your own person, and that you were smart, and that you were still surrounded by love. As hard as it was, I love seeing how you were your own best friend. You weren't your worst enemy. And so a follow-up question is, how did the students treat you at those schools?
A lot of them were really racist and prejudiced, but it wasn't the children, it was the parents. And so they would come in and say, well, my parents says da-da-da-da, or my mom and dad say sa-da-da-da-da. And then you realize the kids were entirely different. And I'll never forget, I was walking down the steps with Jerry Gilbert, and he said, if you let me carry, I'm in the 3rd grade, if you let me carry your books, I'll give you a kiss. And I was like, no, and tripped and fell all the way down the steps, and I'm on my face, and there's Jerry with a hand picking me up. So the rest of until we finished, until the 7th grade, he was always good and kind. There was a boy that called me the N-word, and I said to Miss Elliott, why does Wesley call me the N-word every day? And she said, because he loves you. I said, Miss Elliott, I know that is not because he loves me. And she said, but I love you.
Dude, where did you go to school?
Spring Street Elementary School. And, it didn't matter. And I remember my sister and Yolanda. My sister gave this girl a friendship ring, and she threw it in the toilet, this white girl. And then Yoki sat on her outside in the playground.
Yolanda.
And my sister's Yolanda kicking dirt on her. And Danny Nakamadon got so upset. And I kept thinking, don't do that. We're nonviolent. And I remember the girls surrounded me in the playground. Susan, I won't say her last name, and her dad was a congressman, and she had all these white girls, and they were surrounding me and kicking the dirt, and they're like, well, let's fight. We're gonna fight. I'm gonna beat you up, and I remember saying, well, you can hit me and I will turn the other cheek because I am nonviolent. I believed all that stuff. And if my mother ever tried to discipline me, he can tell you, I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't cry. I was like, absolutely not, Mother. I'm nonviolent. And my mother would be so crushed.
Hey, quick question. Do you know who founded the city of Los Angeles? Anyone?
I know.
Anyone? It was Black Americans.
And Latino family.
And Latino Americans.
They were mixed families.
They worked
Black
together.
And Latino. And they arrived downtown Los Angeles. You all need to go see the monument.
The Museum of Social Justice is down in
downtown Los Angeles.
What's not in downtown Los
Angeles? Cesar Chavez Boulevard.
Near Cesar Chavez Boulevard and not far from Olvera Street. Darn it, I can't remember exactly where. There's a famous hotel. Is it the Hotel Los Angeles? Is that it? Where it's in that square?
I don't remember, but there's a
I
beautiful
can't remember.
square.
But anyway, the
and
Museum of
memorial
Social
for
Justice, yeah. None of us are from this country, none of us. This is the land of immigrants. America is this incredible experiment that never happened before, where people from every race, every nation, every color, every creed, every sexuality, every gender, everywhere can get together in this beautiful, beautiful place and live together and be free. Okay, that's what this is about.
My grandmother's father was a Cherokee Indian, and my grandmother made my father take us to Lookout Mountain in Tennessee and tell us our history, and that no matter what, that you were Native American little children. And I said, Grandmother, nobody's going to believe that. We're Black, Grandmother. She said, doesn't matter what anybody else believes. What matters is what you know, and that you are a Native American young woman, and you're also a Black woman. Because my dad was knee-deep in the civil rights movement at that point, but my grandmother wanted us to understand. And then I was on a movie with Wes Studi, a series, and he's a Native American, big Cherokee guy, and he ran over across the field, and he said, what tribe? I said, what are you talking about? He says, what tribe? What tribe are you with? I said, I'm not with the tribe. He says, yes, you are. And then I said, my grandmother's father was Cherokee. He said, I knew it. I'm Cherokee too. And he hooked me up and took me under his wing.
Thank you for bringing up the Los Angeles part, because I feel like that's very personal to people, to all of us here.
Absolutely.
So the last question I want to ask both of you is, what lessons from your personal journeys do you want the students to take away from this interview?
Anyone or anything or any institution or any people or any group or political movement that tries to create division and separation between people and is telling you that you are different from anyone or anything that you interact with doesn't know what they're talking about. I could go into that deeper, but I know we don't have time here, and it's not an opinion. It's based in Nobel Prize winning science. That's how I get weird. The other thing is, you are stronger than you think. You are stronger than you know.
I just want to say this about love. Uncle Martin said these words, and I used to hear them all the time. He said, I can't like Bull Connor, the police chief in Birmingham, who turned the water hoses and the dogs on all these young people. But God loves him. And he says, and when you rise to love on that level, you love those you don't like. You love those whose ways don't move you. You love every man because God loves them, because God created them. And that's the greatest force in the universe, is love. And go extend that olive branch to that person that's different from you. Sit down at the table to them. Talk to them. And you'll all find that there's this commonality. And like Dar was just talking about, you being love, you got to love yourself. And you got to dream big. That's what my dad used to say. Dream big and then work hard to make your dreams reality. Because listen, it's only going to be uphill from here. It's going to get better. Everything's going to get better. And if you fulfill your dreams and you work and you study, it's more than the sky is the limit. Because one little girl told me when I spoke at her private school, Archer School for Girls, she said, you said the sky is the limit. She said, but it's not, because there are footprints on the moon. Okay?
We would like to thank our generous sponsors and partners, Michael J. LeBeau, NormanAid Peer Counselors, KBEV, and of course, we'd like to thank our listeners. Stay safe and make today well lived.